But also, I was thinking when you were telling me about just a minute ago, a lot of that, where we didn't get to experience other parts of the realms, like more in the areas of the Eastern Shar or down south by the Great Sea, is because it's all profit driven by the company. So they basically, Bob's books were like catching a comet by the tail. You just ride on until it stops.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I used to have these arguments, behind the scenes with various people at on staff, either because they were an acquisitions manager dealing with freelancers like me, or because we were talking about the realms because people were, consulting me as the realms guru, and they would tell me that vice presidents say, yeah, they don't want you to cover, say, this bit here, Star Mantle and all this stuff, because they don't sell, and we know Waterdeep sells. Well, yeah, but you don't know that Star Mantle doesn't sell because you've never done a Star Mantle product.
Right,
But you want
right.
me to do yet another Waterdeep product. And don't get me wrong, I love doing Waterdeep products. You know, it's one of the places in the realms I would want to live in. The other probably being Shadowdale or Cormyr. It'd be one of those. Maybe I could have summer homes in all three. And
Right.
yeah, be a rich noble with my own teleportation network and go boop 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 between. Who knows? But I mean, I would like to be in those places. But and yet, there's part of me that says, why can't we have it all? And of course, the reason why we can't have it all is because wallets are not endless.
Right.
And but when they say, like for instance, now the decision has been followed currently. We're not going to have a baseline Realms product for fifth edition, at
No.
least so far. Obviously we're having adventures set in the Sword Coast. We're not having another Forgotten Realms campaign setting, honking thick book. You
Right.
know,
For
and
$100.
yeah, and people say to me, why don't you write that? Well, it's not up to me. It's up to the copyright holder. They get to decide. And besides, I don't want to do another one. And they go, what? Why not? And I said, because I want a 16 volume leather bound set with little ribbons of cloth markers in each one
Hmm.
that would cover the baseline set and do it properly. Like if you're old enough to remember Encyclopedia Britannica,
Oh
you,
yeah.
you get the bound leather set, um, heavy enough that it could kill people if it fell on it. The cumulative, and in fact, I don't know if this is the same in the United States, but in Canada, if you went back to the early 1960s and the traveling salesman came around with the first volume, gave it
Yes.
for $1 or whatever, and you did the subscription service. In the end, you ended up with a little wooden bookcase for them all with a big slot in the back, and then they came and gave you the atlas, or you bought the atlas to fit in that big slot, and it
Right.
was like a double width book. And I was thinking, that's sort of how we should cover the realms.
Well, I think we'd have to do that. You have to do it by yourself
Well,
because
and there's the problem. And of course, the moment I'm finished, somebody would say that's out of date.
right. Well, they would say it, but it's not out of date if you do it though.
Well, but I mean, if somebody writes a novel, and I want them all to be beavering away on novels, they're going to
Right.
they're going to they're going to make obsolete what I've written about a particular place in the realms. So just like those workers who finish painting the fourth bridge and start all over again at the other end of the bridge,
Right.
so they're never done. And of course, they're painting it not to make it look nice, but to keep the sea salt from corroding the whole thing and having it collapse. And so it is necessary to go on painting it, repainting it. That would be my life. And
Right.
I will be 60 in July. There will be, and who knows? I have to drive to work every day. I could die at any moment behind the wheel.
Oh no.
I live in a place surrounded by crazy drivers. I'm sure all of you listening to this live in similar places, unless you happen to live in a place with no roads, because everywhere on the globe that has roads and vehicles on them has crazy drivers. I
Yeah.
think they grow inside the vehicles like a fungal disease. Anyway, so at any point I could disappear just like that. So there's no way I'm going to be able to get around to that coverage. So I then have to decide, what do I do? To paraphrase Gandalf, what matters is what we do with the time that is given to us, sort of thing. So what do I do? And like most writers and designers, game designers, it's like, oh, something shiny. run towards it. Oh, something else shiny over there. Run towards that. Oh, something else. Now, and the discipline is to actually finish projects and get them out there. Stop tweaking them, stop tinkering them, and move to the next project. Now, if you're doing it for a living, you have to learn to do this because there are these things called deadlines. And I was just involved in a wonderful product, which I won't ballyhoo because of the story I'm going to tell. But it was like we were all doing edits on it to make sure we caught all the grammar stuff. But there's a time when it has to go to the printer. So it doesn't matter if you're finished your edits. Off it has to go.
Right.
In the same way, I am trying to make sure that I cover the things I really want to do and work with the people I really want to work with and do what I need to do to feed, keep the wolf from the door. So if somebody says, hey, Ed, we know you want to do, this Realms novel, but we really like, we've got this new sex toy that looks like a squeaky pink elephant, and we'd like to do a series of novels about these squeaky sex toys in space. And they're left behind on an empty spaceship, and they somehow achieve sentience, and they have an empire by cannibalizing the spaceship they're in. Could you write us a series of novels of that? And I go, that sounds like a really cool idea. No, it'd probably be down there at about number 86 on my. And they'd say, and we'll give you $1 million for the first book. Bang! It's now. because I would like to have cheese to eat every day. I would like to have a hot tub to sit in while I ate my cheese. I would like,
No way.
I would like to be out of debt. Not so.
Oh, who wouldn't? Are you kidding?
Yeah, exactly. And if we all had all the money we wanted, then we could pick and choose the products and just say, well, you could say, I'm not finished with it. Yes, you want the Winds of Winter if you're a George or R.R. Martin fan. He's not ready to hand it to you yet. And I would love to be in that position, but I'm not. So I will have to do what I can. And one of the things that I think I wouldn't have the time to do right now, unless I was doing it with a huge collaborative team, would be to do a huge Baseline Realms product.
That would be so wonderful.
I would love to.
Oh.
But now, if somebody would just say, hey, here, Ed, here's $1 million, get out of debt, pay for everything. By the way, that means you can have nurses for your wife 24/7, and people who will cook for you, and people will bring the food to your keyboard, and oh yes,
and feed you.
Yes, and this we've got this software where if you're mumbling to yourself while you're asleep, tossing and turning, it will write down everything you mumble. So, if you had all that stuff, maybe then I'd have time. But there are all these other things I want to do as well, because I've been working on the Realms for what,
55 years?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, 55 years. And there's all these other ideas for other completely different things that occurred to me, and I just scribble them down, and I hang on to them for when I get around to it. So guess what? I want to get around to a few of them as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then, of course, I still work on the Realms every day. For one thing, I'm getting constant emails and Facebook Messenger requests and Twitter requests asking me about the Realms. And for each person who asks, there's the occasional person who might be just doing it because they're bored or they want to, say frog and see how high I'll jump. But most of them are asking because it matters to their campaign, or it matters to an adventure they're writing or something.
Right,
and so
right.
I don't want to keep them waiting. I want to help. That's what gamers do for each other. That's what human beings should do for each other.
Well, exactly, you would think. Now, Falco, I'm not going to pronounce his last name very well, Siew, S-I-E-W, it could be so. This kind of falls in the land what you were saying about, you're almost 60, you're driving to work, you could die at any moment because of the drivers on the road. He wanted to say that lots of wizards have apprentices so the knowledge and secrets aren't lost. He wants to know who's your apprentice.
Ah, yes. Okay. Let me just reply that there is a plan of succession being put in place. Not just legally, with wills and so on.
Right.
But, I'm trying to arrange it so that people like George Crashos,
Right.
like Brian Cortio, like you, like Eric Boyd, people who love the realms, will get a chance to step in. But I mean,
Right.
I can't dictate that because I'm not the copyright holder of the realms anymore.
Right. Right.
All I can dictate for is the stuff that I own the intellectual property rights to, my unfinished projects. And yeah, there is a plan of succession being put in place, so that my family knows, so that, if I shuffle off this mortal coil tomorrow, people can get their hands on my stuff and publish it if they think it worthy, and support it and keep it out there.
Right.
And
Right.
and again, you see, it won't matter to me because I'll be dead.
Right.
um,
I think that's what he was worried about.
yeah. But I mean, I would like it that people can go on using it, and some stuff, depending on what it is, it can't. The realms obviously is out of play here, but some stuff I would like to become open source, so that everybody can play in the sandbox. Like some of the settings I've been coming up with should be things that everybody can use.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
it seems to have worked well in one and only one instance so far, and that's Cthulhu, the Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos.
Hmm.
Because from the beginning, it was collaborative, as in he would write letters to Clark Ashton Smith and Frank Belknap Long and so on, and August Derleth, and they would write back and they were all inventing stuff for the mythos and throwing it in there. That doesn't mean there are tons of inconsistencies, but the point is, it seems to have settled into being something everybody can use, not
Right.
just a copyright thing, but people seem to come into it usually fitting in nicely with what's already there, or trying to. So it works, and I would like to, if I think some of the settings would lend themselves to being something that would be fun for lots of people to play in as a sandbox,
Right.
then that would be cool,
That
because
would be cool.
that would be a legacy I think I could smile at. To
Right.
to um to be able to think that, 20 years after I'm dead and gone, there'll be novels written in a setting that I had a hand in touching off, and people are still having fun with it. That would be
Right.
really cool. Um,
That'd be a great legacy.
yeah, and there's always the letting your baby out of the nest, and then when do you cede control? But then every parent has to do that too. They you spend your child's formative years telling them, don't touch that, you'll burn yourself. No, you're not leaving the house dressed like that.
Right.
And
Right. No.
and
Yeah.
then 60 years down the road, they're coming to dress you because you can't dress anymore. And the world has turned.
No.
You
No.
see, yeah, you get it.
I do get it. I do. I'm only 4 years behind you, so I do get it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, you have to let go.
Right.
And besides, any book is in effect a collaboration between the writer and the reader, because all the writer's doing is putting these curved squiggles of ink on a page, with assistance of publisher who gets it out there, and then the reader looks at those curved squiggles of ink and conjures up ideas of what's happening and what the setting looks like and what the characters look like, which is why so often a movie or TV adaptation of a beloved piece of fiction doesn't work for us, because they say, "Oh, Lord so and so doesn't look like that."
Right. Well, because I don't see him that way.
Yeah, exactly. So unless the original novel had a photograph of Lassie on the cover, and you go, "Yeah, that's Lassie, all right,"
Well,
unless that situation pertained, we all see things differently. But we are all conjuring up the story for ourselves, and we're seeing it through what we have experienced. I mean, if somebody says his garment was puce, if you don't know what that is, if you've never seen it, I mean, you can go away and Google it and look it up and go, "Oh, so I guess it's like this." But if somebody says, "Like your Aunt Delilah's blouse that you're staring at right now," oh, okay, now I know what puce is. You know.
oh, that's funny. Well, I was thinking when I was looking at that question when he wrote it down was, in a sense, everybody's going to be taking up the mantle of continuing the realms. They kind of do that now with every story they tell, even in their games in their living room, because everything keeps the realms alive that way.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yet things have to be kept alive that way, for to work for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, absolutely. So let's, if we can, I'm not going to ask anything specific, but I want to switch to the Dales a little bit. Just to kind of brief over some questions that I have and that I've heard from people in the past. One of them is the current calendar we know is DR. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Since the Dales were not around during the times of Netherese Empire, was it the was it the Netherese calendar, or what was the calendar back then before the Dales?
There are 4 or 5 competing calendars. Because that's more realistic. That's more real world. And guess what? The gamers decided, no, 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 enough of that nonsense. We don't want to think about that. We're sticking with DR. Because twice in Realms products, in-house designers have tried to put a new dating system in.
Right.
And they've put it in, and the gamers just totally ignored it. Because they're interested in what they're interested in. And they're used to this, and they're running with it. So let's do it.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter what, lovely innovations we innovate. It's like, say, look, I got this new car. It's called the Edsel. Please, everybody drive it.
Well, why was specifically the Dales? Was it because it was more widely used around, like, through Waterdeep and to the Sword Coast, or was that just the players wanted it that way?
It was because Elminster was our mouthpiece and guide to the realms, and Elminster lived in the Dales.
Oh, okay, so all quacks
So-
ran by him.
Yeah. So we got Dale Reckoning. Now, I then postulated, because I had to think, okay, so yeah, but how would that fly in Waterdeep? And then I think, oh, I get it. If it's all trade routes, and Dale Reckoning is being used in Sembia and Cormyr as well, and they're at the other end of the Heartlands caravan routes,
Right.
and therefore the merchants traveling are using them for dating, and that becomes important up and down the Sword Coast, because aside from Mirabar, Luskan, and so on, taking their mineral wealth straight to ship and then south to Waterdeep, everybody else is using these trade routes that go to Baldur's Gate, and they go to Alm and Tethir, and then they go out to the Heartlands and so on. So just by a fluke of the way things worked out in our real world, it happened with English.
Right.
It became this widely spread language because that empire lasted long enough and outlasted some of the others. I mean, you could see the remnants of the French colonial empire with their former colonies where French is spoken. But French was the court language in England at a particular time, so why is it that English, and of course regional variations are everywhere. Americans are speaking American, not English.
Correct.
As any English person will tell you. and of course, in Canada, we're caught right in between. So, we sort of wince half the time. But those are like regional dialects and variations, in the same way that someone from the deep south has what a northerner or northeasterner would say is a pronounced accent. Of course, to the person from the deep south, it's the other way around.
Absolutely, it is.
but I postulated that by some fluke, rather than anybody's decree or fiat, by some fluke, the Dale Reckoning traveled with the merchants, and a lot of the gods aided and abetted this through their clergy, because it was the merchants that spread word of the latest news and rumors, and that's how they could tell their followers, yes, I am the great and good God. Look what happened down in this faraway place that you'll never visit, but it proves how powerful and beneficent I am.
Right.
My followers. So they sort of said, yeah, that's cool, let's just go on using it. So just somehow Dale Reckoning became the gold standard.
Okay, that's okay. Now, still in regards to the Dale, this is kind of like which came first. Was Shadowdale the main focus, or was it the spinoff of another Dale that you created first?
No, Shadowdale was the years and years and years and years and years ago. I started playing the realms for the first consistent time, as opposed to trying out D&D. It was in 1978, and it was the Company of Crazed Venturers in Waterdeep. And shortly thereafter, I was asked to do a campaign in the public library I was working at then, the Donald Mills Library, in North York, in what is now Toronto, Ontario. And they needed a program for young adults or teens. And they had exactly 2 programs. One of them was, you have to take this basic first aid to be a babysitter. So that was well attended. And the second one was good grooming. One person came because their parents forced them to, and they stayed 1 session and never came back. Surprise!
Yeah, really.
So they said, hey, Ed, you're the crazy gonzo guy, and the only guy. What can we do that'll appeal to teenagers? And I thought, okay, rock concerts and wild sex orgies are probably off the table in a public library. Well, how about this Dungeons and Dragons thing that I play, that a lot of young gamers I know play, and so they rapidly became lukewarm on this idea because, you see, for library programming, you want good statistics, and therefore you need, like, showing a movie for 1 hour or 1.5 hours of staff time, and you can cram 60 or 70 people into an auditorium, whatever your fire limit is. So you got 1 hour staff time times 70 people equals successful program. In Dungeons and Dragons, 4 hours of staff time for 6 people.
Exactly.
What? Anyways, but I started a library campaign, and a whole bunch of people turned out, most of whom became my regular gaming group, and we started in Shadowdale. Well, we started actually at the Haunted Halls in Evening Star, but their reward very quickly was to be given the lordship of Shadowdale and traveling to there. Because in my Realms campaigns, the players have as much of a say as the Dungeon Master.
Right.
And if it comes to votes, and we did have votes on some things, like when they were shifting editions, first to second, do we change bards to second edition bard? And what they did was vote and said, let's have both of them.
Ah, there you go.
And the way we voted is Dungeon Master gets 2 votes. Every player gets a vote, so that the players can easily outvote the Dungeon Master.
Right.
So we would vote about some things, and for most of them we didn't need to vote. We just talk it through and come to a consensus. And they didn't want to stay in Cormyr at that point because they didn't feel that they were ready for a heavy intrigue campaign caught up between the nobles and having to be social nicety and war wizards spying on them and all the rest of it. They wanted to do some more adventuring, go to dungeons and kill things. And they wanted to have a little bit more freedom. So the Dales was more freedom. So they could have refused the pendant.
Right.
Kelvin offered them the pendant. It was literally a choice dropped in their laps. And they discussed it in character. And then occasionally they would raise their hand and say, player to DM, and step out of character to ask something, and then step right back in. So that they decided amongst themselves. And you see, to me, that's the essence of being true adventurer heroes, is that you choose your destiny more than the world forces things on you.
Right.
And they chose to go to Shadowdale. So that's where they wanted to adventure. So from henceforth, the Dales became richer and deeper all around them. And they realized that, holy crap, they had stepped into the fire from the frying pan, because the Zentrum were running these trade routes through the Dales and trying to, if not conquer every Dale, run every Dale from behind the throne.
Right.
So that they didn't get taxed, they didn't get any delays, they could have supply dumps, and nobody, and it also meant Zents could behave as they pleased, and the local lord wouldn't say boo to them. So if the Zents arrived all drunk and mistreated all the pleasure lasses at the local brothel, left them all with bruises, and took 1 or 2 of them away with them for later fun, the local lord wouldn't say a word. And that's the way the Zents wanted it. And so, of course, once you have a group of player characters who are trying to rule their Dale, and they rapidly learned they didn't want to. Like Douse became Lord of Shadowdale, and he rapidly said, no, I want to go adventuring. So when Morngrim came along as a NPC, and I'd said earlier about Dove, I've always had 1 or 2 NPCs in the party that you could step in and play if your character goes down. Well, Morngrim was a short-lived member of the Knights because I knew his heritage, and I always intended that he would get called back. He was of the royal family of Ruathan, and he was going to get called back there. He was also a chance to try out a new character class, which was official, the Cavalier.
Oh, yeah.
That had been added to the game, and it was, okay, we're going to have a Cavalier. because they wanted to try it. See, my players vote, and my players. I'm there to entertain my players, so they get to say what goes. I'm not there to say, oh, okay, this is my world, and you just adventure in it and die in it. No,
Oh,
no. So they rapidly handed the pendant to Morngrim and said, we want to be adventurers. We don't want to be tied down for all this crap, because I was throwing everything at them that local rulers and administrators have to handle. Taxation, the fact that there's a lycanthrope somewhere in Shadowdale that's eating other people in Shadowdale. And well, everybody looks to the Lord now. It's you, and they're in this tower that the drow are coming up from underneath. Oh, well, that's your problem to take care of now. How the Zents are coming, and every envoy from everybody who wanted to co-opt them, from Sembia, from every other dale, from Cormyr, we'd just like to sort of take you over. And of course, in the end, with Cheryl Roadmantle, they were trying to marry their way into not ruling the Dale, but just controlling it totally.
Right. Right.
And I was letting all that play out in front of them. And do we want to do this? Do we want to become administrators? No, screw that. We want to go out and draw our swords and kill things. So here, you mind the throat. And again, that has to be their choice. What I was doing was offering them D&D play in the realms can be this, or it can be that. It can be a monster hunt. It can be a monster capture for zoos. It can be intrigue. It can be becoming merchants and becoming rich in fantasy the way we aren't in the real world. It can be, it can be all these things. What would you like to do tonight? And I wanted to make sure that as a dungeon master, I was offering them everything so they would settle on what they wanted to do, and that all those possibilities were always on the table, so they wouldn't fall into a rut and say, I'm tired with this campaign, I'm not coming in anymore. No, I want it to be so that they can't wait to get into the realms every, Saturday night or whenever it is. They can't wait to get there, so that when in the real life, they ended up going all over the world, so that showing up for a realms play session means getting on a plane and crossing oceans. Yeah. They will still occasionally want to do it, as opposed to saying, yeah, that was fun when I was a kid, but I moved on now. No, I want it to be something that is part of your life for the rest of your life. Give me their minds when they're young.
There you go. So that kind of answers my question. When you created the realms, when you came up with an idea for it, did you have this type of scenario in mind, or did you just say, oh, this is a place where Elminster lives, and there's a castle, and there's a lord and all this, or did you have something more specific?
I wanted it to be a big, huge, sprawling fantasy world, and I wanted to explore it. I didn't know what it was all about when I started. It was the backdrop for my short stories about Mert, the moneylender, going along the Sword Coast. But I always wanted to explore this world, and I still do. I mean, that's why it still feels alive. One of the reasons it still feels alive, and I haven't finished exploring it yet. None of us have. There's entire continents out there we haven't really seen yet, because we're stuck in this little bit of Faerun, by and large, and that's okay. I mean, Tolkien did the same thing with Middle-earth. There's all this stuff that you never go in the novels. You can see them in the appendices. I mean, the so-called Easterners, and they're two blue wizards who go beyond Rune into other lands we never even see.
Right.
Yeah, there are lands beyond Umber where the Corsairs are from. Now, I remember when Mayfair Games briefly had the license for that. They started doing products, exploring those bits off the map. And some of those products I loved because they felt like they almost fitted, and some of them I said, yeah, this doesn't feel like Tolkien's Middle-earth. And of course that's always the danger. But the point is, Tolkien understood that leave the audience wanting more. There should be stuff that we don't find out about. There should be stuff left unsaid. There should be stories left untold, left hanging, because we hunger to find out more. And of course, we do the other thing in the realms. We just go on carpet bombing it and exploring in all directions and giving you all these treasures we toss on the table and leaving and never getting around to everything. Like we were talking about dwarves, right? Like Neverwinter, like Baldur's Gate, like all the cities we haven't detailed. I started because the license for Dragon and Dungeon magazine was canceled. The Cities of the Realms series that I was starting, and I got to do 2 of them. One got published, Krimmer. The second one, Tazir, I wrote up, and the license ended, and it never got published. Well, I had a whole list of cities, all of them approved by Phil Athens at the copyright holder at that time. He'd said, yeah, these are all okay. Phil was still at Wizards and said, yeah, I've agreed you can do these cities in this order, and we never got around to doing them. These are all these things that we never get around to. And so
Right.
in the realms, we've done it the other way. We go on and on, expanding it and making it richer and deeper. But of course, that just makes you hungry for more. If we give you, and that used to be one of my unwritten rules of the realms. If you tie off something, if you take one of my loose ends and you write a product or an adventure or a novel and you tie it off, I need 3 new loose ends.
Right.
Each one you tie off, give me 3 new ones, because that's how the world still feels alive. And it still does.
And it still does.
It's alive. No.
It's alive.
Yeah.
Now
Don't
here's
you're
a,
back.
here's a exactly. Here's a 12-year-old boy question, like we had, like Curry was talking about last time. When Storm Silverhand chops wood, are her boots magical?
That would depend on what she put on. Usually, yes. No. When Storm is chopping wood, she's always wearing a headband, keep sweat going down in her eyes. She's usually wearing leather wristbands for the same reason, keep the sweat from making her hands slick, and therefore the axe slipping. And she's usually wearing boots. And almost all of the boots she owns are magical in one way or the other. Although it may just be magic that keeps them from rotting
Or slipping when she's swinging the axe.
Slipping, or letting water through, making sure they don't leak. It could be simple things like that. But yes, at least one pair of boots that Storm has, because that's come up in Realms play back in 1980, I think. She can walk on water and she can walk on ice without slipping.
Really?
Yeah. So she was once rushing after some Zents, and they got around the other side of a frozen lake and figured they were, and she just ran right across the lake at top speed. And they realized this and turned around and started. They had time to use their windlasses and start loosing crossbow bolts at her. And she would run and dodge on the ice and throw herself flat and then get back up and keep running closer and closer. And they're going, how could you do that on glare ice? Well, because of the boots.
That answers the question right there.
yeah, but I mean, and yes, the 12-year-old boys. Well, guess what?
I mean, I remember reading that and laughing so hard when she's chopping wood in the nude. I don't know why I found that funny. But
you see, various people used to say, oh, Ed must have a dirty mind. Well, yes, he does. But the whole point of it, I was trying to point out to everybody, when you've been alive for hundreds of years, what does that do to you mentally? When everybody you loved as a child has died of old age and you're still there, and that's happened over and over again. And entire kingdoms that you either ruled or lived in and loved are gone, and you're still alive. Are you going to be completely crazy? And you have this silver fire, and you're the servant of the goddess of magic. You have all this power. What does that do to you? And yeah, it probably drives you nuts, and they probably are all nuts. But one of the things it means is they just don't care anymore. I mean, you're not going to be embarrassed or ashamed if you're stark naked and a whole bunch of people walk up to you and they're going her her her, looking at you, and then you just go, yeah, is there something, gentlemen? You just don't care. Right. And that's what I was trying to convey with those. Some of it was also, we had a very strict code of conduct, and we couldn't have sex scenes. I would write them in, and they would chop them out and read them aloud to each other at TSR. But anyway,
in dark cubicles.
They would stand up on their chairs in cubicle land and start reading them aloud. And anybody who wasn't wearing headphones, and remember, when the Realms first was acquired by TSR, there were no Sony Walkmans.
That's true.
Yeah, it's that long ago. Headphones were these big honking things, so most people weren't wearing headphones, but anybody would they'd stop what they were doing and start listening. Oh, you got another Ed sexy. And of course, that was also in the days of computer fanfold paper, where you could just tear them off at the perforation. But I I would write them in the same way that a good writer who's doing a gunfight, even if they don't include every single shot in the finished narrative, they will write them and they will plot where people move to make sure they haven't had the guy fire his 6-shooter 46 times without reloading, and to make sure that this guy can run from that building to over there in the time that you say he did it in.
Right.
It's like when the math teacher says, "No, I don't want to see the answer you copied off the guy next to you. I want you to show your work." So, yeah. So you do the work, and that would include if we're rushing to a sex scene here, I write the sex scene. I know it's going to get chopped out, but I write it because then the rest of the book will, to me at least, will ring true, even if it's going to be taken out by the editor. I wrote how it affected the characters. Well, then the same thing. Nudity was sometimes a shorthand for sex. And of course, you can see that very vividly. There's a scene where one of Manchun's apprentices walks up to his guarded door, and the guards are looking at her, and she's looking at them, and she just lets her robe fall off her shoulders and strides between them, stark naked. You know what she's going in for.
Right.
You don't get to see any of it. The bedroom door is closed in your face, but it's a shorthand for it. And yeah, that was also part of the shorthand. But in the case of Storm and the Seven, it's simply that they've been alive for so many centuries, they don't care. Right. And I wanted to show that they are different from you and me. Not that everybody in the realms is a filthy pervert. No, it's that how does being alive for centuries affect you? How does being the special chosen servant of a goddess who is the most powerful deity in the setting, because it's the goddess of magic, and that's the essential thing that makes the setting different from the sword or the largest thing with jaws and claws like a dragon rules.
Right.
No, it's magic that is the great equalizer. And magic is so therefore the deity of magic is anyway. So how does that affect you mentally? I wanted these particular people to be different. Now, to some people that means, oh, let's start an arms race. Everybody needs to, we need chosen of everybody. Everybody needs to have special powers. No, right. It wasn't about that at all. It was to examine. In fact, one of the things in Spellfire, it was to take a young teenage girl who wanted to get away from an abusive situation and have adventures. Be careful what you ask for. She has to have adventures, but I needed a mechanism that would keep her alive and have the rest of the world interested in her, because she's just a teenage girl, for the book, hence Spellfire. And then it immediately becomes, okay, what happens to great power? Does it corrupt absolutely? Does it corrupt greatly? What does it do? And everybody's trying to get their hands on you, not for carnal purposes, but to get hold of your Spellfire so they can use you. Like Terry Pratchett wrote in one of the very early Discworld books, we've got a wizard and we're not afraid to use him. So that sort of thing, examining that. And right. Therefore it made the book a whole bunch more interesting for me to write than, well, you meet in a tavern. There's a dwarf, there's an elf, there's a tall, mysterious wizard who is really good at being a mysterious arsehole to everybody else. And there's some little innocents who will stand in for every man. I won't call him Samwise and so on because that would be derivative.
And the bartender looks like he has a story to tell.
Yes. Yeah, it's like let's do something different.
Right. No, that was definitely different. I wanted to ask. Go ahead.
I also want right at the beginning of the realms to have female main characters, because that way I thought all the gals who gain will have someone they can identify with. I mean, some of them will identify with male characters, but they should have examples out in front of them. In the same way that people now, black people would watch Black Panther, the movie, and go, hey, look, black superheroes, right. Black cast, yeah, or the same thing. I just wanted to have, it was a chance to and also I could play all the jokes about, yeah, right, says the guard. This little girl's gonna take me on. Ha, 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 boom,
Right.
Anyway, sorry. I'm blathered long enough.
No, that's okay. No, because it kind of leads me, it's slightly off topic, but I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about this, kind of dawned on me. So you have Storm, who's been alive for centuries. Elminster, and then even if you cross into different genres, where you have the Highlander. Remember the Highlander show that was on TV?
There could be only one.
There can be only one. But this is not the movies, but the series that was on.
Oh yeah, the series. I was going to say
Right.
there can be only one, and it's Sean Connery. And everybody else could.
Well, there could be only one until we have a sequel.
Yes, right.
You know, and my thought is because it doesn't portray, it seemed to portray in every culture or every fantasy culture. They all, when they live to be old enough, nothing bothers them. They're the tired old man. They're the naked woman chopping wood who doesn't care what people think of her, just waiting for the next, is the next day going to bring me death, which they probably want. But then you have the drow who live to be, 1,500, 2,000 years old, and they never stop pining for power. They don't get melancholy and sit back and go, well, I've been alive for 1,000 years, and I've had 14 families and 300 kids, and I'm just gonna sit back and relax. They want to know what's around the next corner. What makes them so different?
Their innate nature. No, I mean the whole point of this game and this setting is the differences, and it's also the richness of life. But I mean,
Right.
this is fantasy life, and I mean all you have to do is look through the monster manual, the first one, or any edition of them, Bola's Guide to Monsters, and the latest one, to see how different various races and creatures are, different ways of living, and the same thing is in our real world. There are these weird, slow-moving worms. There are platypus, duck-billed platypus.
Right.
Critters are different, and it's like, oh, okay, and that's part of the richness of life, and that's part of what makes it fascinating. That we wouldn't approach things the same way. That the elf and the dwarf will only rarely form an alliance, and they will be objects of wonderment to each other. There's that scene in the Hobbit movies, spoiler alert, where Toriel heals a stricken dwarf, and two other dwarves are watching, and one of them says, "I've heard of the healing powers of elves," but, and they're seeing it for their first time and being awed.
Right.
And the humans that all this was occurring in front of were awed by everything that was going on. They were frightened from the attack, but then everything that was happening around them was causing fresh awe. And because the creatures that were legend, the creatures of folklore that they never expected to meet or have fighting in their house suddenly were, and they're seeing them firsthand. And of course, that's the very thing that Tolkien was at pains to show us in the original, where the hobbits leave the Shire and go off and have these great adventures, and in the Scouring of the Shire, how they're changed when they come back.
Right.
How their experiences. They've fought in wars. They're coming back with mail shirts on them. And the old gaffers are saying, "Oh yeah, you went away, didn't you? Yeah, probably up to no good." And for them, not much has changed. But you see, but the people who went away, and of course that's a recurring theme in fantasy literature, which Tolkien picked up on. Frodo, the Middle Earth has been saved, but not for me. I've been changed. And if you look at Wagner's Ring the Nibelung saga, Brisingamen is fair and Brisingamen is heavy, and the carrying the magic doodad changes the carrier forever. And of course, Tolkien shows us that all the way down from Gollum, everybody who's carried the ring, Bilbo, Frodo, even Sam, has been changed by it.
Right.
And of course, the wonderment, remember, we're getting back to people being different. All of these proud humans and so on, the rings really affected them, controlled them, took them over. That's why they're a Nazgul ring race.
Right.
But these little short, plain, simple people, the hobbits, they're really tough. They managed to survive carrying the ring, in some cases for centuries, But I mean, they stick with their things. It doesn't consume them as quickly. It doesn't bend and break them as quickly. And you have everybody else succumbing to the ring or saying no.
Right.
We get to see Galadriel say no. I could take the ring, yes, I could do this with it, but no. I will remain Galadriel. She makes the choice. And of course,
Right.
that's what every life is about, real life, and also what you should strive to give your players if you're a dungeon master: choices, moral choices in life. That's what makes life worth living. Sometimes we make the wrong choice, sometimes we really screw up. But but if you just sleepwalk through life and never make any choices and just let things drift and other people, then you haven't really lived, have you? If you make the choices, then that's where life is. Because each choice is, well, okay, I made a choice here. I took the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. Sort of thing.
Right. I actually have that hanging up on my wall.
Yeah, there you go. You make the choice,
Right.
and that is a little bit more to defining what you are to yourself, if not to other people. So, oh, I choose this, I chose that. And, all those horrible conundrums, you're falling through the air, and you can reach out and grab one of your children or whatever. Who do you choose? All those horrible things. But I mean, it's a choice in life. Do you go for the lady, or do you go for the gold? The Lady and the Tiger, that lovely story by Frank R. Stockton, The Lady and the Tiger, where one door has a lady that he does not love, that he has to go through and wed and live with for the rest of her life. And the other one has a hungry tiger that will eat him. And the princess whom he loved, he looks up at her for a sign, and she makes an imperceptible but clear to him pointing at one of the doors. And he goes through that door without hesitation. Which did she send him to? His death or happiness with someone else?
Right.
You see, and it's not it again, the story ends with you never know the choice, which is why the story is memorable. And to me, it doesn't matter what the choice is. In a particular case, it's the fact that you consciously made choices. That's how you build your own character. That's how you build a life. And that's how you build an imaginary life for a character in a role-playing game. You make choices. You choose to go back to, to rescue your friend, or go back to rescue your friend's body in the dungeon where it could mean your death. Or you say, forget it, he's in the rearview mirror, roll up a new character, move on. It's what choices you make, what matters to you. Like I said earlier, when giving my players all those choices of style of campaign, do you want to play intrigue? Do you want to go for the gold? Do you want to go for the power? Do you want to become influential and connected? Or do you just want to kill things? Do you want to get the girl? Do you want to get the dragon? And instead of killing the dragon, do you want to marry the dragon? It's what choices do you want to make in life? Anyway.
No, exactly. And actually, choices kind of leads in. It's a good segue into my next question here. In an earlier podcast, you had talked about TSR assigning signature characters to the author. Okay. Given that choice today, how would you invent or reinvent a signature character for you to write about?
Oh, I didn't have a choice then. I was told Elminster is your signature character.
Right, but given that choice today, what would you do?
Oh, okay. First of all, I don't think Elminster should be a signature character.
Right.
He should be in the background wizard. I would like to start with somebody with a lot less power that adventurers and readers can identify with as they make their way in the world. So either, like Chandril, or I would want it to be Mert, the engaging rogue, my original Realms point of view character, but we look over his shoulder and see what outrageous thing he's going to do next. And Mert is a amalgam of three fictional characters: Shakespeare's Falstaff, Guy Gilpatrick's drunken engineer Glenn Cannon, and Paul Anderson's Nicholas Van Ryn, the trader, a merchant trader. So, and if you're not familiar with any of that stuff, just go look up a depiction of Falstaff, and you'll get fairly close. That's what I wanted Mert to be, and that looking over his shoulder would be a far more interesting. The thing about Mert is he used to be an adventurer who could outfight people. He was the Old Wolf. He was a mercenary company leader, a war captain. Before that, he was like a Conan figure. But he's now too old, too fat, too out of shape and sick. He's wheezing all the time. He stumbles around in big floppy sea boots. He has food stains all down the front of his giant paunch. So he can't outrun enemies anymore, so he has to outwit them. And he's trying to make his living as a scoundrel of a merchant. So what's he like? And that to me is fascinating. That's somebody I'd like to look over the shoulder of.
No, absolutely.
That would be an interesting signature character. But really, there's what I would like to write, and because the Realms is a shared world, and I sold the Realms, so there have been two copyright holders, TSR and Wizards of the Coast. What would they want? What would they like me to bring to the buffet? Like, in the case of the Realms, Drist is a signature character.
Right.
And Bob is writing Drist. Drist is Bob's character. So, obviously, any other signature character should be unlike Drist, should not be in the same, occupying the same niche of an action hero with angst, who is an outcast amongst his own people and is experiencing what it's like to forge his own life in the Realms. And of course, he can never get away from his heritage. It keeps following him. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so Elminster is definitely different, but I'm not sure I would like my signature character to be that. I would love to do a sort of Bertie Wooster, silly upper class twit fop. Elaine came the closest with Daniel Othan.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Yeah. I would love to write a character like that, and either in Waterdeep or in Cormyr, because you need to have wealth, nobility, and a bustling crossroads thing going to really have the setting for that character. And that would be fun to write too. So I could. One of the things I'd love to do, and one of the things that was the original plan back in the early days of TSR, with the people who were head of the book department for only a few months before came along, before the Realms was acquired, is the original plan that Jeff Grubb and I hatched is, Ed, show us the Realms. And originally the plan was I would write 7 or 8 novels in a row, all set in different parts of the Realms, starring completely different characters, and then those characters would be handed over to whoever the TSR book editors wanted to write a story. Now, it might be that one of them would pick them up and make them their own and write a series, or It might be that they would be passed around. That this person would get to write a Mert novel, and then that person would get to write a Mert novel. And of course, there are possible pitfalls there when, Mert, like some bad things that have happened in comic books where people seem to act out a character from what you think their character should be to fit the plot needs of the particular story that's unfolding right now. And so in the hands of many authors, a given character could look and act different, and it doesn't ring true. So there's that possible pitfall there. But that was the original plan, that Ed would write 8 to 12 books as fast as he could pump them out. And of course, this didn't happen because then it was a gaming company.
Right.
So they became necessary. No, Ed has to show us the Realms in gaming. We need him to pump out 8 or 10 gaming products and hand his stuff, which is why other people would take my stuff to write the Moonchase, write the Savage Frontier, right? It's because it was make sure it doesn't become the bottleneck that Gary Gygax was for Greyhawk, because he was trying to run the company, advance the game, and write new rule stuff for the game, create new monsters and so on. And at the same time, he couldn't show us Greyhawk as fast as the gamers wanted it to come out. We were kept waiting for Greyhawk products. Well, they had that example in front of them, and they had Kryn. Dragonlance had taken like a huge amount of company resources, everybody piling in. Well, they wanted to make sure Ed wasn't the bottleneck for getting the Realms out there. So I became doing the Realms and game things, so I never got to do those novels. But originally it was like, jump all over the Realms, introduce characters that can be point of view characters that other people will take over and write other. So give us the subplots, give us the problems, and show us what it's like in these various corners of the realm. So we would have had a novel set in Jondath. We would have had a novel set elsewhere in the Vilhan Reach. We would have had a novel set on Tharsal. One in the Border Kingdoms, one in Om, one in Tethir. And then the readers would have said, I want more of this, I want more of that. Oh, Tethir's catching fire, we'll do more Tethir coverage. So you see, we would have carpet bombed the realms more widely than it turned out happening, where Ed's got most stuff on Waterdeep and on the Dales, because that's where his campaign was. So let's concentrate there.
That's a shame. It really is. That kind of falls into the next question I have here. Nate, with the realms being so rich in the different cultures and the characters and the things that there's just unlimited supply of people you can write about. Name some people that that have never encountered each other in the realms that you wish had, like two characters meeting up, and why?
Well, you see, I'm usually going for the pratfall things.
What?
The British farce, the pratfall things. So I would love to have Queen Philpharo hasn't seen a Zune for 10 days,
Right.
and he's coming home that night, and she's waiting for him in the royal bedchamber, and Azun gets waylaid by other things, and he doesn't get home that night. But Mert is visiting the castle, and he opens the wrong door, not from tomcatting, but because he's been told, "Oh, go along this passage, and there's a bedroom ready for you. The bedchamber will be the one with and he just opens the wrong door." And he doesn't come in and see Phil Farrell sprawled on the bed, sultrily waiting, because Phil Farrell doesn't expect Azun for hours yet, so she's off in one of her robing rooms. She's bathed and perfumed herself, and she's now choosing suitable clothing. And it's a large suite of rooms. So Mert comes in, kicks off his boots, starts scratching himself, I really should bathe. Nah, I can't be bothered. And he just pads around the room, shedding clothing in all directions, heading for the bed, which, of course, is a large four-poster with curtains, which, of course, means he can get in one side and not see who's getting in the other side.
And you can't see inside the bed either.
Right. And then you could have one of these, wait a minute.
Wait a minute, you're not my lord.
And then, of course, Queen Fee can probably physically take him in a fight and would take him down in a hurry. Doesn't feel like a Zune, doesn't smell like a Zune, isn't a Zune, so and then what would happen there with the comedy misunderstandings? That sort of a meeting. Or there'd be the meeting where Elminster is meeting with old friends in an upper room in Waterdeep, and a duty wizard from the Watchful Order of Mages and Protectors is raiding a particular upper room. Bad intel, breaks in, interrupts what's going on. You'll have to come with us, sort of thing. And Elminster says, I don't think so. And the Watchful Order Magus says, yes, you have to. And no, out comes the magic. And Elminster goes, is that the best you got? And proceed from there. It's those sort of meetings that are inherent mistakes, unintended. I'm not so hot on the, okay, let's throw these two action heroes at each other and see which one hacks each other to the ground. I'm not so much about let's set up the big fight. I'm far more about plans go awry. So, for instance, you have a halfling that is escaping the Xanathar through the sewers, stumbles through the wrong door, and literally falls on the head of a sleeping dragon. And the sleeping dragon is awakened very abruptly and is none too pleased, but doesn't want to eat or kill the halfling, wants to think, somebody's finally found my lair. Now I've got somebody who can be my hands and eyes and ears up in the city, because I can't fit out of here, and I can't pass amongst the populace without, I'll be pin-cushioned with arrows, and there'll be wizards hurling stuff at me. No, but I can send this person. I want to get this, and I want to get that, and for years I want to get this. So, little halfling, you are going to do this for this, and if you do not, I'm going to kill you slowly. But, and of course, let's assume for the purposes of that the halfling is too scared to try any trickery or treachery, deceit, and that works out fairly well as a go-between or messenger or envoy for the dragon, and they begin to like working together. I mean, that would be a fascinating thing to explore a book like stuff like that. It's those sort of meetings. I don't actually very often play the game of, well, let's see Manshoon meet, Elminster face to face, or let's see Storm slapping Vazul across the face and telling him to get lost, and see what happens. You can do that, but to me that's called burning the characters. And when you take characters who have fascinating possibilities and you do things with them, as opposed to leaving them hanging there as fascinating. And this is particularly important in a role-playing gaming situation where hundreds, thousands of dungeon masters and players could do something different with that character than each other do, or that you would do, because you haven't in print done something. You haven't killed that character off. You haven't had them fight. You haven't had Larlock square off against the Twisted Rune,
Right.
and burn up those characters.
Well, think how much different the Hobbit would have been if Smaug and him became friends.
Yeah. Yes, my little burglar. Why don't you go and get me this? Why don't you go and get me that?
That's exactly. Let's lead this king forward. Let's just see what happens here.
Yeah, and in the same way, if I throw Halaster and Larlock against each other, inevitably, I'm tying off possibilities by stating what their relationship now is. Even if I don't kill or destroy one of them, or weaken both of them, I've now made decisions. Remember I said earlier about making choices? I've made the choice for you. So that's a big responsibility that a storyteller has, whether either a dungeon master or a novelist. Once I've written it down in the novel, and you've read it, then that's what happened to that character.
Right.
And then I want to keep as many balls in the air, as pawns on the board in play for people to use in their own ways as possible. It's a heavy responsibility, Jeff.
But it works out well.